The cameras may have stopped rolling years ago, but the emotions captured inside Burn the Stage the movie are echoing louder than ever, especially after renewed attention has turned to candid reflections from Jin, revealing just how fragile, human, and quietly intense life inside BTS could become when the spotlight burned brightest. As fans revisit the documentary's most raw moments, Jin's words have resurfaced with striking clarity. Known publicly for his humor and reassuring presence, he is shown confronting the pressure of touring, physical exhaustion, and the emotional weight of trying to keep morale high when tensions simmered behind the scenes. In scenes filmed during the group's grueling world tour period, Jin speaks about suppressing his own discomfort so the atmosphere around him would not darken, offering smiles even when he felt stretched thin. It is a reminder that the polished perfection seen on stage often masks a far more complicated reality once the curtains fall. The renewed discussion has also brought back memories of a brief but meaningful clash between Jin and V, centered on last-minute choreography decisions before a performance. The disagreement, portrayed not as explosive drama, but as the type of sharp friction that can arise when artists are exhausted and striving for excellence, momentarily unsettled the group. Voices tightened, expressions hardened, and the pressure of thousands of waiting fans loomed just outside the door. In that tense pocket of silence, leadership quietly stepped in, with RM urging focus and reminding everyone of the audience counting on them. The moment passed, the stage lights rose, and BTS delivered yet another flawless show, leaving viewers to marvel at how seamlessly conflict can be swallowed by professionalism. What makes these scenes resonate now is not the argument itself, but what followed. Later footage captures the members sitting together, decompressing in hotel rooms, acknowledging hurt feelings, and trying to understand one another better. Jen reflects on how such confrontations, though uncomfortable, became stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. They forced honesty into the open and ultimately reinforced trust, turning stress into something constructive rather than corrosive. The documentary has long been praised for peeling back the glossy surface of superstardom, but this renewed focus on Jin's perspective adds fresh emotional weight. His vulnerability reframes him not merely as the group's light-hearted eldest member, but as someone carrying invisible burdens while striving to protect the team's unity. For longtime fans, it deepens admiration. For newer audiences, it offers a rare education in what global fame actually demands. Years after its release, Burn the Stage is once again proving why it remains essential viewing, not because it glorifies conflict, but because it shows how 7 young men navigated exhaustion, disagreement, and doubt without letting those forces tear them apart. Through Jin's reflections, the story feels newly alive, a testament to resilience, communication, and the quiet courage required to keep moving forward together, even when emotions run hot and the world is watching. That renewed attention has also encouraged fans to re-examine other subtle exchanges threaded throughout the film, moments that once passed quietly but now feel charged with meaning in hindsight. Viewers have pointed out how the camera often lingers on tired glances, heavy sighs, or half-finished sentences, suggesting that the tension Jin described was not isolated, but part of a larger emotional ecosystem shaped by relentless schedules, injuries, and the psychological toll of performing night after night in unfamiliar cities. One particularly resonant remark comes from Suga, who reflects that arguing with people you care about is not necessarily destructive, but sometimes proof of how deeply everyone is invested in the group's success. Reframed through Jin's perspective, that line now feels less philosophical and more painfully practical. Social media discussions have since exploded, with fans trading timestamps, screenshots, and long-form analyses, drawing connections between those backstage moments and later interviews in which the members spoke more openly about burnout, self-doubt, and the pressure of representing not just themselves, but an entire generation of listeners. Jin's calm demeanor in public appearances, they argue, seems even more deliberate when contrasted with the private vulnerability captured in the documentary. the resurfacing of these scenes has turned Burn the Stage into something like a time capsule, one that reveals the emotional architecture behind BTS's meteoric rise, long before global stadium tours and record-breaking achievements became routine headlines. What stands out most is how the group's internal conflicts never linger in isolation. The film repeatedly shows arguments dissolving into conversations, awkward silences giving way to laughter, and exhaustion softened by mutual concern. Jin's reflections underscore that pattern. Conflict appears not as a threat to unity, but as a pressure test that ultimately made the group sturdier. In an industry often criticized for glossing over artists' struggles, those moments of honesty now feel almost radical, inviting audiences to see idols not as untouchable symbols, but as young men negotiating fear, ambition, and loyalty in real time. As the documentary circulates again through clips and fan edits, Jin's comments have taken on the weight of hindsight. Knowing how BTS later navigated hiatuses, solo ventures, and reunions lends extra poignancy to his early determination to keep spirits high even when his own energy faltered. The story no longer reads simply as behind-the-scenes drama from a difficult tour, but as an early chapter in a much longer narrative about endurance and growth. In that sense, the renewed conversation around Burn the Stage is less about reopening old wounds and more about appreciating the resilience that carried the group forward. Jin's candor reframes those tense corridors and cramped hotel rooms as crucibles, places where doubt was aired, frustrations were confronted, and bonds were quietly reforged. Years later, those scenes resonate not because they show cracks in the foundation, but because they reveal how deliberately and how painfully that foundation was built. The latest wave of discussion has also shifted how audiences interpret the group's polished public image in the years that followed. Scenes once viewed as fleeting flashes of backstage tension now feel like early warning signals of the emotional costs that would later become a central topic in conversations about fame, mental health, and sustainability in the music industry. Jin's quiet resolve, standing just off stage, breathing deeply before stepping back into the spotlight, has become emblematic of that dual reality, the performer who must project confidence while privately carrying fatigue and uncertainty. Fans revisiting the film have noted how often the members instinctively gravitate toward one another after stressful moments, gathering in hallways or on hotel beds to talk things through. These unscripted interactions, now magnified by hindsight, suggest that communication was never an afterthought, but a survival mechanism. Jin's reflections slot neatly into that pattern, revealing how he often chose restraint over confrontation in the heat of the moment, saving harder conversations for later when emotions cooled. It paints a portrait of a group learning, sometimes painfully, how to balance individual limits with collective responsibility. The renewed attention has also sparked broader conversations about the documentary's legacy itself. Once promoted primarily as a behind-the-scenes look at a world tour, it is now being reinterpreted as an emotional blueprint for how global acts endure under extreme pressure. Jin's vulnerability gives the story a new focal point, transforming what could have been read as simple tour fatigue into something more complex, a study in leadership without titles, in emotional labor performed quietly, and in the invisible work required to keep a team moving in the same direction. What resonates most strongly today is how little of that struggle was visible to the outside world at the time. On stage, the performances remained explosive and precise. Interviews were filled with jokes and gratitude. Award shows glimmered with confidence. Yet tucked inside the documentary is a parallel narrative of young artists grappling with fear of failure, physical pain, and the anxiety of letting one another down. Jin's comments have become a doorway into that hidden dimension, encouraging fans to read between the lines of every dazzling moment that followed. As clips continue circulating and discussions stretch across timelines and forums, the story feels less like a relic of the past and more like a reminder of how success is forged in fragile conditions. The renewed spotlight on Jin does not diminish the group's achievements, it reframes them. Each sold-out arena and historic milestone now carries the echo of those narrow corridors, tense rehearsals, and late-night talks that shaped the members long before triumph felt inevitable. In the end, the resurfacing of these moments turns Burn the Stage into something timeless rather than dated. It stands as a portrait of ambition colliding with exhaustion, of disagreements transformed into dialogue, and of 7 individuals learning how to protect both their art and one another. Through Jin's eyes, the documentary reads not simply as a chronicle of a tour, but as an origin story for resilience itself, one that continues to resonate precisely because it refuses to pretend the journey was ever easy. The conversation has even begun to ripple outward into discussions about how audiences consume behind-the-scenes content in the first place. What once felt like privileged access to glamorous tour life is now being read with greater sensitivity as viewers recognize the emotional stakes embedded in every offhand remark and weary smile. Jin's reflections have become a focal lens for that shift, reminding fans that documentaries are not just promotional tools, but historical records of people under extraordinary strain, frozen at moments when the future was still uncertain and the pressure was relentless. Many fans have noted how differently those scenes land now compared to when the film first premiered. At the time, the group was still climbing toward unprecedented global heights, and much of the discourse centered on their discipline and work ethic. Today, after years of record-breaking success and evolving conversations about artists' well-being, the same footage feels heavier, more intimate, and more revealing. Jin's effort to shield others from his own exhaustion reads less like simple professionalism and more like a form of quiet sacrifice, one that underscores how deeply intertwined the members' emotional lives had become. The renewed attention has also sparked admiration for how deliberately the group cultivated trust during those early years. Viewers point to the way disagreements were never allowed to fester indefinitely, how conversations, however awkward or emotionally charged, were prioritized before the next show, the next city, the next round of rehearsals. Jin's perspective reinforces that pattern, framing conflict not as a rupture, but as part of an ongoing negotiation about boundaries, expectations, and care. In an industry where competition and hierarchy often dominate narratives, those scenes now feel unusually tender in their honesty. There is also a growing sense that the documentary captures a crossroads moment, young artists standing on the edge of superstardom, still learning how to pace themselves, still discovering how to voice frustration without damaging fragile momentum. Jin's comments seem to hover over those frames like a retrospective voiceover, adding emotional subtext to every tight smile and hurried costume change. The group may not have known what lay ahead at the time, but viewers do, and that knowledge turns the footage into something closer to dramatic irony, charged with both tension and awe. Ultimately, the revival of interest in these moments speaks to why the film continues to resonate years later. It does not just chronicle a tour, it documents a learning curve, capturing the messy human processes that underpin artistic greatness. Through Jin's renewed spotlight, the story expands beyond fandom nostalgia and into something more universal, a meditation on teamwork under pressure, on the cost of ambition, and on the fragile emotional scaffolding that supports even the most dazzling success. As fans keep revisiting, reanalyzing, and resharing those scenes, the narrative around the documentary continues to evolve. What remains constant is the sense that its power lies in vulnerability rather than strength.